Hello everyone, Dom and I are delighted to be part of this series and thanks so much to the Tunnell Trust for organising it. So our Tunnell Trust tour was due to take place back in mid-March, and this was the very first piece of work to evaporate from our diaries due to the virus. In fact, our tour was due to take place up to just 4 days before the very first concert. And then a week later the UK was in lockdown, so I suppose that shows just how quickly things escalated. We really hope that the tour can be rearranged for some point in the future when concerts are again possible, and we really look forward to playing those concerts when they eventually come around. So our duo was formed almost 3 years ago now, when Dom and I both moved to London for our master studies. Whilst I studied at the Royal Academy with Michael Cox, Dom studied at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama with Charles Owen and Noriko Ogawa. Prior to that, we were both studying up in Manchester at the Royal Northern College of Music. So as a duo, we've really enjoyed playing concerts up and down the country, and definitely over the last few months we've both really missed playing live concerts. There are 3 works in today's online concert: a work by Schumann, a work by Andy Scott, and to finish with the Sonata for Flute and Piano by Mel Bernice. These videos were all recorded pre-lockdown in November and December respectively. So 2 of the videos were recorded at St Mary's Perivale, and thank you so much to Hugh Mather for allowing us to use these recordings. And the Mel Bernice Sonata was recorded at the RNCM.
Hello, I'm Dominic Degavino, and I'd also like to welcome you to today's online concert. I'm going to introduce the first piece very briefly, which is the first of Schumann's 3 romances, opus 94. These pieces were originally written for oboe and piano. Over the years they've been played on violin and cello and clarinet, and of course in this arrangement on the flute. They're subdued pieces written towards the end of Schumann's life in 1849, and they're really without a hint of virtuosity of any kind. Very simple and very lyrical. So the first of Schumann's 3 romances.
I'd like to say a few words about Andy Scott's Salt of the Earth. This is an incredibly fun little piece that originally started life as a tuba concerto, believe it or not, and it somehow ended up as an arrangement for flute and piano. It's a really fun work to play, and as you'll hear, it has a really strong Latin jazz feel to it. Both Dom and I have really enjoyed working with Andy on various projects throughout the years. I play in another duo with guitarist James Girling, and James has arranged a number of Andy's works for flute and guitar, so we frequently programme these into our concerts. Dom's worked with Andy on various big band projects as well. I think it is an interesting link that Andy's saxophone quartet, the Apollo Quartet, were some of the first Tunnell Trust winners back in 1990, so I think it's quite fitting that we include Andy's work in today's concert.
Just before I introduce the last and the main piece on our programme, I'd also like to extend my thanks to the Tunnell Trust for putting on this series of online concerts. As you'll of course be aware, there's been almost no work at all for musicians over the last few months, and precious little income as well. So we're really grateful to organisations like the Tunnell Trust for putting their time and effort into putting initiatives like this together. The last piece on our programme is Mel Bernice's Flute Sonata. Melanie Bernice is perhaps not the best known composer, but she's a really interesting figure. She studied at the Paris Conservatoire in the 1880s with César Franck as one of her organ teachers, amongst others, and she was a really promising composition student as well. And during her time at the Conservatoire, she fell in love with one of the singers, a young man called Hettich. And unfortunately, her parents were very disapproving of this. They were adamant that she wasn't going to just fall away and spend the rest of her life in this useless artistic circles. So they decided instead that they would marry her off to a businessman who was some 25 years older than her. And so she was forced to drop out of the Conservatoire and stay at home living a family life without music. And it was only about 10 years later that Mel Bernice got back in touch with Hettich, and amongst other things he encouraged her to begin composing again. And they also had an affair which was of course quite frowned upon, especially back in the sort of at the turn of the 20th century when this was going on. And to make matters even worse, they had an illegitimate child during the affair as well. And Mel was of course forced to keep all of that a secret, otherwise it would sort of bring shame upon her and her family. So this sonata was written really just after all of that had happened, and I think it contains a lot of perhaps understandable passion and inner turmoil. It's in 4 movements. The first movement is quite a yearning sonata form movement in a moderate tempo. The second movement is perhaps the only lighter place in the whole sonata. It's a scherzo. And then we come to the third movement, which is the slow movement and really the emotional heart of the whole piece, before the fourth movement, which is quite a fiery finale.